went to the ladies' room. Well, we can tolerate it.
evening, everybody. At this moment, I would like to have everybody rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion to accept the board meeting agenda. And Chance and Christie. All in favor? On to item C, community open forum. Is there anyone that has any blue cards? No? Pearl, did you receive any? And no blue cards, so we'll move on to item D, special presentations. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Tom for the capital project planning update.
Yep, and so we have King and King here. I saw Kurt Narberg. Kurt, you can hop right up. The podium is yours.
Good evening, everyone. All right. So as we talked about back before the holidays, we are winding up the pre-referendum process for the capital project. So our goal was today to talk about where we're at with the overall scope of work and the costs associated with that. And then our next steps will be, based on any input that we get from today, would be to finalize everything so that at the March 9th meeting, which is the meeting we got moved to that Wednesday, you will be voting on the referendum so that we're outside of that 45-day window prior to the vote, which will be with the budget, and then also to do the secret resolution. Secret resolution will be coming before that. And then Maureen will also be at the March 9th meeting talking about an update to the project financials. So that's where we're at. So the final proposed scope. So after our last meeting, we went back, revised some items, took some input, and then we did kind of a finalized pricing exercise by Turner Construction. And so what you're going to see, we wanted to be very clear from the things that I spoke about last time, that there's some things that have been deleted off the list for now, and it's mostly because of the cost implications of those items of work. One thing I want to point out is we're in very trying construction times right now. Obviously, you all understand the inflationary issues everybody's dealing with. The supply chain issues, it has had a dramatic effect on material pricing and labor costs in the construction industry. So we're seeing everything from 30 to 50% increases across the board in the construction industry, depending on the date and time that we happen to bid a project. And so nobody has the crystal ball looking out a year from now of what this stuff is going to cost us. We don't know if it's going to be less expensive or more expensive, but we have to be ultra conservative to protect what we're able to do for the district. And so what we did is we went through the pricing exercise, and some of the bigger items did come off the list because they affect so many other systems. So you'll see a theme. So when we look at the proposed scope for A, coal, one of the items that came off the list was the corridor toilet rooms, any of the plumbing and toilet related renovations that we do. The other line item that you'll see that got taken out for now is the corridor walls. And the corridor wall work is going to have to be done at some point, particularly at the elementary schools. But we're not going to be, it's a big renovation because we have to take the walls down, we have to rebuild them. It includes the doors, all the entryways, the ceilings, and so it has a lot of ripple effect to other components of the buildings. So at A, coal, we're going to do all the work that we had proposed last time. We removed the toilet rooms in the corridor, and there was a theme from my last presentation about some of the hot water related items. That work is going to get done through other maintenance or related items over the years. They're of a scale that they don't necessarily have to be done in the capital project, so we removed them out of that scope of work. And Hastings Mallory, oh, and I'm sorry. So the total proposed cost of those items at A COLA about $4.8 million. Hastings Mallory, we've got the septic system and the rear parking lot. We are going to do the toilet rooms at Hastings Mallory, and then we've got the tile in the corridors and the classrooms. We've got the boiler plant, air handling units, unit ventilators, and then some of the lead and piping issues. So all that work that's proposed is in the scope of work. That's about $5.3 million. At Brewerton Elementary, now remember we did a lot of work at Brewerton Elementary in this last phase of work, and so from a priority standpoint, again, some of these items came off. The retaining wall we can get to, it's not in dire straits. The corridor wall and the fire rating issue, as I mentioned before, has a lot of tentacles associated with it, so we're not going to do that right now. And then the crawl space moisture is it's manageable right now, so we can manage that in a different way. Hot water tank, similar to the previous comment, and then the transformer has been taken out. Sorry, I just wanted to see if there was an asterisk up here yet. Okay. Millard Hawk, we're going to do the toilet rooms there, and the nurses suite, and then electrical plumbing. We've got the piping and lead issues, and then all of the boilers. That's about $1.3 million worth of work. Middle school, we have a whole bunch of items here. Really the only thing that came off was the irrigation sprinkler controls in the water tank. So that's $2.6 million. You'll notice a couple items have asterisks. Renovation of the gym, reconstructing and reconfiguring the north parking lot. Those that have an asterisk are alternates. So they are not currently included in the estimates that we have for the overall project scope. They will be designed as part of the capital project work, and if the bids come in under, we will add those into the project, which is pretty typical of all the previous work that we've done, that we've included some of those elements so that we can accommodate fluctuations in the marketplace. So again, with these numbers being ultra conservative at this point in time, we don't want to get to a point where we have tons of money left over, so we want to try and get as much of this work completed as we possibly can. So those asterisk items will be alternates. And then at the high school, again, we're doing the work that we originally intended, except for the rubber stair treads, nosing piece, the cooling tower, and the hot water tank. The other two big items is replacing the freight elevator in the large group room, which that work will be an alternate as well. CSI, we talked about this before. All of the work now and in the future requires us to continue to use CSI for flex space, which allows us the opportunity to do some of this work in group classes, no different than what we did in the last projects, and to have that available. So the work that we do at CSI is aidable as long as we continue to use that building as surge space, and we've had the roof on the list for a long time, so it's just getting that component done. The stadium work includes the mechanical systems and gas maintenance center. We've got some miscellaneous items, and then the bus garage work. So that kind of rounds out the total package. You add up all those line items for each of the buildings, we end up with a nice round number of $25 million for capital project. Now, if you recall, when Maureen talked about kind of project financials, the goal, which is still the goal, is to minimize tax impact, if any. And so when we get to the March meeting, possibly even in between, Maureen will be updating the financial numbers for the project, the capital reserve, and what's available to fund the project, and what those projections look like. And I can tell you that based on everything we've been looking at, it's going to be minimal, if any, tax impact. So that's where we're at. So we're right on target with what we wanted to do. This is the February update. At the March 9th meeting will be the resolutions for the referendum and for the seeker. update on the resolution will have all the financial information in it. And then April will be any public forums that we want to have, and then we'll vote the capital project. Questions? I can go back and read every line item if you'd like.
When would the work start then? Is that slated for next year?
Yes. Yeah, so we would start the design process. We get the drawings into SCD, which is a big variable right now because they're short-staffed as well. The goal would be to put us in a position to start some of this work next summer, and would be almost identical to our previous work. We would include at least 2 summers in there to get the work done, and then obviously some of this work could happen during the school year in some cases.
Thank you.
You guys are easy. You know where to find us if you have anything.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So now we will transition to the data presentation. We will have Aaron Phillips.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay, so we are going to get started. So you know our goals because there are board goals which lead to the town's goals, which lead to the principal's goals. So our first one is our increasing oral reading proficiency, oral reading fluency proficiency by 3% from the beginning of the year till June. So the growth that the kids make for the entire year. And then our composite scores, and we're going to get into what the composite scores are in a little bit. So this year's focus, the principals and I have had a lot of conversations over the summer, and we really are focusing on Tier 1, or what goes on in the classroom, that classroom instruction, so that all the kids are getting solid core instruction from their teachers. So these are the different changes that we have made this year to really hit the majority of kids, and then some of it also goes into intervention. So we have put a reset on the use of CKLA for our pre-K to grade 2 kids. We've got a walk to skills model, which you've heard a few of the principals in their presentations speak about earlier today, or earlier this year at our first grade, and that's where the grade level is switching kids and remediating and putting interventions and keeping kids moving if they already have a solid core foundation, so that those kids continue to move, and then interventions are put in place for the other students. We've got daily phonological awareness practice that should be UPK 2, and then with Haggerty, which is a little bit of a longer program, there's more involved to it, and then Kilpatrick at grades 3 through 5, which gets into more of advanced phonological awareness skills. So one of the hardest tasks that the kids have to do is you give them a word and they have to, or you give them sounds and they have to put a word, spell it backwards, you know, kind of give it to you backwards. And I can't do it when I did it with my own kids at home, so it's a bit of a challenge. But students who have a solid phonological awareness background don't have a problem with that, so that's a good thing. We've got in our 3rd grade, so when you look at the progression of skills and the way they are built, our students learn the code, so all the phonics and letters and sounds and the different combinations in K1 and 2, and then at 3rd grade we really get into looking at some syllable types. So we've got a Tier 1, so all the kids are exposed to this, and there's hand routines with it. It's the company is 95% group, and then they're multisyllabic routine cards. So all of our 3rd grade students are getting that, and then if some students are still struggling with different syllable types, which helps them decode longer words, then they work on that a little bit in a small group intervention setting. We've got rewards at our 4th and 5th grade, and that program is Tier 1 as well as intervention, classrooms and in all of our buildings are switching kids, and based on some placement tests, so the kids who have solid fluency skills and sounds, the ability to read words, are in a group that's moving faster at this pace, and this is really focused on multisyllabic words and ways to build vocabulary with prefixes, suffixes, and root words, so that the students have a better foundation with some content material, reading it on grade level, their fluency rate and vocabulary, so that when they get to middle school, they're a little bit stronger with reading bigger words. And then what we have done we did some PD on this in our fall superintendent conference days, is a 6-step lesson plan. So very standardized for different intervention groups at all grade levels, as well as intervention. So it focuses on phonological awareness, teaching the skill, practicing the skill, getting into some dictation or writing, and then the end step, which is that we don't learn to read in isolation, we read in context. So really getting those kids to read, it's either depending on their ability, just reading words for some kids is a challenge, but then as you go up, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, books and novels and things like that. So building on that. So when we've got intervention groups at the grade levels, the 6-step lesson plan is about a 30-minute lesson plan. So what we said is the bookends, so the beginning and the end of the lesson are the solid parts. You've got to do your warm-up and your reading, and then alternating the dictation and some of the practicing throughout the week, so that the kids get through the entire format of the lesson in the entire week. So, and that was done in conjunction with our reading league coaches that we have for our OCLI initiative. So that is our focus. That's a lot. Okay, so we get into the data. So the composite score, which is part of our goals. In kindergarten, the composite score is made up of these different subtests. So your letter naming fluency, which is literally the kids look at a sheet and it's got the letters on it, and they just have to identify there's uppercase and lowercase letters in there. Phoneme segmentation, which is their ability to sound out, give you the sounds of a word. Nonsense word fluency, so it's exactly that, nonsense word fluency, the nonsense word, so there's 3 letters, and the kids have to be able to read them. And you assess with nonsense words because it lets the teachers know if the students have a solid core. If you have a solid core and you know all your letters and sounds and how they're made, then you can read pretty much anything. So that's why it's assessed. Correct letter sounds is where the kids, so if the word is, let's say, vax, Vix, the kids can sound it out, so Vix. The words read correctly is if you look at that word and you just go Vix. So you get credit for all the 3 letters, or the 3 sounds, but you're gonna be able to get through more words because you don't have to sound it all out, like it takes time for that. So, and then word reading fluency. So those are what we call our tricky words. They're those high frequency words that don't always follow a pattern. So that's that. So this is, come away from it. Okay, so 131 kids at the top. See how that for grade K in the first part there has 131 kids? So that's where those, as a district, we had 131 kindergarten students take the benchmarks in the fall. So the second week of school we started. This past time, just a few weeks ago, of those 131 kids, so this is this group, 70 of those kids in the district stayed within the red, which is they're struggling. 23 students moved to yellow, so they're getting better. 28 of those 131 kids moved to green, which is you're on benchmark, and then 10 of those kids moved to well above benchmark. So that's comparing the same kids from fall to winter. So we can see as a building, this is a district view, and we're going to get into some individual buildings in a few minutes, but so you can see that for each of the different categories. So the red is well below benchmark, The yellow, which is the next one over, the 35 students, is below benchmark, the green is at benchmark, and then the blue is above. So what you really want is for the kids to stay when they're in that green and blue. You'd like them to at least stay green, but move to blue. And in the blue, you kind of want them to stay blue. You don't want them to go backwards. So when they go backwards, that's where you look at, you go in and you can look at the individual students and say, okay, was it in attendance? You know, did they go on vacation for a little bit? You know, you just look at those different skills. Sometimes the skills just get a little bit harder as they go, and they're just not ready, so you just give them a little bit of a push, and then they get right back up to where they started. So you're looking at apples to apples. It's not a different cohort of kids. It's the same kids and where they moved, where they started, and then where they are in January. So then in the spring, we'll be able to see where they were and then where they ended the year, those same 131 kids. So this is called the correlation report, and this is the composite scores, which is based on all of those things up above.
Aaron, are they taking the same test each time?
No.
And I don't mean the same exact questions, but like a test a fourth grader take, well, kindergartners, you have that on there, a test a kindergartner takes at the beginning of the year, I assume is much different than the test
Yes.
they take at the end. So, like in the blue category, the fact that there's some greens, they may just not have progressed as quickly, but that doesn't mean that they are lower than they were in the beginning of the year.
Not necessarily, right. So we switched to Dibbles 8, this is Dibbles 8 last year. In doing the research on we've always used Dibbles for as long as I can, since I was a teacher here. Dibbles 8, the progression builds from developmentally where the standards kind of take you through the curriculum. So it's very different. The passages for oral reading fluency increase with difficulty as they go based on the skills that the kids have learned throughout the year. So, right. So I've decided to, because our main focus is really those foundational reading skills, which is your the phoneme segmentation, which is your phonological awareness, which is what we're putting a lot of effort into, because that will set the pace for the rest of their reading development. So, so we're going to look at this and then the correct letter sounds, because that's where the kids are really starting to connect letters with sounds. So, so this is broken up by building on this one subtest. So you can see A and Cole, the same report, so it's read the same way. 23 students were off level at the beginning of the school year. Now you've only got 12 because you combine the yellow and the red. So 11 of those kids moved to green or blue, and then you always want to try to see them move within the, the red to the yellow. But what we noticed was when you even looked at the students who were red, the kids they moved within that red bracket. So you don't want to see them staying put, you want to see them moving. And some kids do, it's, reading is developmental, just like a lot of other skills. So they're getting it, they need a little bit more practice, a little bit more time with this skill, but they're getting it because they're moving. So you can see Millard Hawks, Brewerton's, and Hastings. What I will say is that Hastings put in a program, a routine, a very explicit routine, this time last year with kindergarten and first grade. So those teachers had some practice with it this year, and you can clearly see that those teachers now started it right off in September with practice and review, and it's very consistent, it's very routine. The kids all are answering in unison, so even students who are behind a little bit get that constant exposure to kids who are on level in that repetition. So you can see Hastings is the third school down, the growth that those kids have made. So since this report since the principal started looking at this, Brewerton has already gone down to Hastings to see, because obviously what's happening there is working. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at these reports, because if something's working in one of our buildings, why not try to replicate it in the others? So Brewerton has gone to look at K and 1, and our reading coach from Millard Hawk is learning that routine so that she can bring it to Millard Hawk and Brewerton, and then teachers here are learning that routine, and then they're going to go down and and see what it looks like what the whole thing looks like, so that they, you know, people are visual and they want to see it in action. So they're working on that, but, so that's a positive outcome there.
Are they implementing it in Cole too?
Cole started it this year in kindergarten. Teresa, their reading coach, so Teresa is between Hastings and Cole, and then Gal is between Miller Hawk and Brewerton. So Teresa started it with kindergarten teachers this year, and their growth is good with this subset as well. So very pleased with that. Then we get into those correct letter sounds. So the kids look at a word and they are able to tap out each sound to it. And then a lot of kids, what they do is they'll, you know, and then they tap it and then they read the whole thing. The end goal is to really get them to just look at that word and just read it out loud. But because kindergarten kids are just learning those letters and sounds, that's the stage that they're, you know, we're really at. So that's why I chose this part to look at. And again, you can see the successes and the areas that, you know, the buildings are working on. But when you've got, you know, 37 students who started in red and only 13 are still there, that's, you know, and this is just kindergarten. So, yeah. Any questions on kindergarten so far? So first grade is made up of the same subsets for their composite score. The only one that got added was oral reading fluency, because these students now have, you know, our kids will start to read. They're just getting into the first reader in kindergarten right now. So by the end of kindergarten, they're into some solid books that are decodable. So come first grade, you know, that skill just continues to develop. So same composite scores. This is their composite results as a district. You can see where the kids fell. And then you get into first grade. And again, this group of students were kindergarten last year, right? So last year's school was 2 days a week in person, and then 3 were home. Many of our teachers did that asynchronous or synchronous simultaneous where they were teaching. A lot of them did the Haggerty like that, because you could have the kids in person and at home doing it. But these kids, you know, COVID has kind of hurt them a little bit when you're learning your foundational skills and you're not getting that solid every day right there with a teacher. But they moved. So you see, you know, Cole and Hastings have the same routine in place. They're a little bit different in the makeup of the students that went from K to 1, because remember Hastings started this last year in kindergarten, so the number of students that went to first grade off level were less. So our Walk to Skills program, it is working. We are seeing growth, and that's a good thing. We've got a couple tweaks to make, and we're making them. I've been around, I just finished Walk to Skills visits, and we've revamped and kind of tweaked things in all the buildings to maximize time. So a lot of it's that pacing. When you take too long to get through a skill, you have some behaviors that develop. Kids tap, you know, they kind of lose interest a little bit. So working on some of that. Groupings have changed because some students who were in a little bit of a lower group are ready to go. So they've moved and they're moving. So all groups in all buildings have changed, which is awesome to see. And people have been down to look at Hastings as first grade. So it's good, it's positive. That's what we want to see. We want to see obviously more of the kids coming out of red, but I'm confident with the changes that they're making that we're going to see some good growth the second half of the year.
So this would validate really what Hastings did last year with the least amount of red coming into the year, right? So this measurement would show that you know, I don't want to say statistically, but you are, what they're doing is working better, right? So multiplying that, I think, would be, you know, so if I'm reading this right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the, because of the routine that they do, so they in the off-level classes, they're exposing the kids to the grade level material, because the hope and goal is that the kids in some of these lower level classes have moved to where the on or above level kids are. So you want them to have that same exposure and the same skills, so they're not starting with their on-level peers off level. So they've got exposure, but then they get in smaller groups and they have instruction at their level. So, but even with that, that structure and that format, they're still doing that routine. And you can't really tell that the kids who, in fact, I had to, one of the pieces of feedback that I gave for one of the teachers at Hastings that's teaching that, I said, the kids are ready. They were reading it ahead of you. So that goes to show that what they're doing, we teach them to scoop so that they're reading kind of in phrases and then they put it all together. But when they don't need to scoop anymore, that's the good part, right? So I said, they're kind of ready, and that's an outsider looking in. When you're in it all the time, you just kind of go through it. So, so that's positive movement. So.
Well, I think too, because you have less red, right, for a colorblind guy.
Yes.
And you have less red and more blue.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
If you compare, and so I think you're onto something, honestly. So,
Yep.
So.
And what, when Brent and I were looking at the data, what we were noticing was that the kids they're all coming in a little bit higher than historically, and the growth that they're making is more. And Brewerton has always been the building that has been on the top. And because we're all now doing very similar things, we're all following the curriculum the way it's intended, we all have reading coaches that are working on the same skills, you're seeing some of that shift a little bit. So we just want to make all of our lines look like that third school down. So we're working on that. And then, like I said, Brewerton and Millard Hawk are learning those routines now. And that's a good thing. That's, we're not in competition. Our kids are all going to funnel into one middle school and then one high school. So we're not competing against each other. We want to give our students the best foundation so that they're successful in those next groups, those next stages.
No, and I don't think you'd ever put one school against another, but you now have a recipe
Right.
that the data is bored out to be a better approach. Better is, I don't like the word, but a different approach. Right, it's a working approach. So it's be interesting to see.
And I watched it last year and I saw improvement, and then to see a bigger time frame with the kids in person, 5 days a week, all day, and the time that the teachers are taking to learn this and do, and they want to do better. They want to have their lines be more blue and green, and that's that dedication that they're putting in to, they didn't have to go visit Hastings. They could have said, no, we're good, but they approached the principal and said, whatever they're doing there is working, and I'm working too hard not to have mine look like that. So can I go see it? I said, at Millard Hawk, I said, I will cover your class if you can't get somebody to cover so that you can go see it in action, so that they know when they can see for themselves. So we're working, we're getting there. So again, the same subset that we looked at for kindergarten, that ability to look at those sounds and put them with letters. And then we get into second and third. They don't have as many of those foundational subsets to look at. So really it's just their composite score, their ORF, which is their oral reading fluency, and then the maze, which the kids they get a passage, and if your comprehension, if your fluency is there, you can read it, and then there's blanks throughout, and there's 2 words that they can choose from. They have to have the comprehension and have that vocabulary background to be able to choose the right word, which will then make that sentence or paragraph make sense. So that's what the maze is. And then 1 and 2 is fall to winter. So, and then you can see the growth that each made. So already just middle of the year, we've surpassed that 3%. That was the goal for the district, which is good. You know, you can see there's some spots that go from yellow to red, which we don't want to see. And Mr. Smolnik and I we met on the 2-hour delay that we had last week or whatever. He's got some things in place they're changing and they're doing walk to skills at their 2nd grade. They've got 2 class sections there, and we've had a lot of kids move in. So their class sizes are a little bit larger than the other ones, so being able to break up doesn't really give you smaller sections. So they're working on some schedule changes that would allow for some more supports to be there during their skills block to give some of these kids who are going the wrong way extra support. But he's got a plan in place, and I'm working with him closely on that. And then 4th and 5th. Same thing, and we should be getting the OCLI results. All the other districts just finished up. So I think next week is when the countywide data is due to Oswego BOCE, so that we can see as a county where our 3rd graders are, because that's the target point. And that's that. Any questions?
Is there, on those last 2 slides, I hear about Cole with, you know, that there's a plan in place, but the disparity between Brewerton and Cole in both of those slides is a little bit concerning as well. Brewerton's green throughout the whole thing, and
Yeah.
Cole's yellow to red, yellow to red, yellow to red.
Yeah.
What's
So
the
Brewerton-
disparity? You know, why is it so drastically?
Well, Brewerton is a school that kind of always comes in green. Even their kindergarten kids, the majority of them are always green. A lot of that is due to exposure. The poverty rate is not as high there. So when I was working with Jen at Miller Talk about some of her grade level stuff, I didn't even put Brewerton in there. I said these other schools that have a poverty rate, you know, that's higher than yours are outperforming you. So we've really got to look at our K-1 at Miller Talk and make some decisions. But, you know, Brewerton always, even on state tests, you know.
And I hear you. I mean, I've grown up here, so I have an idea of that, but I guess talking about exposure, you would expect that to also be replicated in K-1 then, with COVID, if it was about what they're getting at home and the exposure at home and things like that, and it wasn't the case in the K-1. You know, they were very comparable to the rest of the schools. In fact, Hastings was, you know, on top. Obviously, we talked about why, but I guess looking at 2nd through 5th grade and seeing such a disparity, I guess that wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it's COVID still,
Right.
because those kids.
Yeah,
were
and
here,
once they
but-
get to, you know, 2nd grade, they've got, a lot of them have that code. So if they're reading, and they, you know, read at home more and they do some of that. So you tend to see that split a little bit at the older grade. You know, coming in at kindergarten, they're all kind of a blank slate and they're all learning the same thing. So you might see some kids have great letter names because the parents really work, you know, they watch alphabet stuff, they do puzzles, they read books and things like that. Where others are more focused on sounds based on if they went to pre-K here and that kind of thing. So, yeah, and once the kids have a skill, you want to see them stay there and move forward. So, you know, we need to get all of our kids more green. I mean, that's the end goal. And, you know, what Brent has said, he goes, we're always green, but it's the growth that the kids make. So if they're not, like you can see at 5th grade, Hastings and Cole grew more on their composite scores than Brewerton did. So it's at 5th grade. So it's, you can come in a higher achieving student, but if you're not making that growth, these other schools that have more to close, more of a gap, will start to make more growth. So it's about looking at that tier 1 instruction and what's happening. Are you using your time the right way? Are the kids doing more of the reading and the thinking? So a lot of, you know, sometimes what I've seen is that the teachers are doing a lot of the thinking and the reading, you have to have the kids do it. So they have to struggle with it a little bit because that's how they learn.
Well, and I guess, you know, earlier you had referenced that there was class size issues at Cole because of, you know, numbers moving in. I mean, is there a plan in place to correct that? I realize making 2 classes into 3 and reassigning teachers in the middle of the year is not really ideal, but, you know, I also don't want to, just because it's not ideal, not give them what they need.
Correct. No, there'll be another 3rd grade teacher next year, for sure. And then because there's 3 sections of 3rd grade, or 1st grade going to 2nd, there'll be another teacher there too.
Right, I'm saying this year, though, like,
Oh.
there's another 5 months left
Right,
in school.
so, yeah, I mean, we put a TA in one of the classrooms to help with some group sizes, but, you know, with COVID, these kids have made relationships with not only their teachers, but the kids in their class.
Right,
So
so that's why I said it's not ideal, obviously, to
Right.
reassign them, but I mean, what do we need to be doing? I mean, with COVID money, I don't know if the moving is related to that, I don't know, but what can we or what should we be
So-
doing to, because I don't want to just, you know, chalk it up to, well, we'll fix this next
Right.
year, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing,
No.
but what are we doing to fix it now?
So Mike is putting the walk to skills in place, so Teresa has worked with their 2nd grade teachers, and they've got a plan in place for that, so that they're gonna be dividing up. Mike put a survey out to his staff, asking them kind of, you know, that team approach as to what do you guys see as concerns, you know, what do you see that's working, what do you see that we might need to change? He put right out there, what do I need to do as a leader to help you with this?
We've
And
also, we also, in all the elementary schools, middle and high school, if a student wants to stay after for extra help, we're paying the teacher for that, and we have a late run that goes out. So I know it's being utilized in our elementary buildings. How many of the kids at Cole are utilizing that, I'm not sure. How many of the parents are?
Is that only communicated to parents of students that are like red, or is that across the board, any student that wants to stay after?
No, it is targeted for the students who are
Okay.
struggling, yes, because they need a little bit extra. And then he and I are working over February break to look at their schedule, because the teachers have said, we need to relook at the schedule to benefit the students so that they've got more opportunities for smaller groups, which will then give them more opportunities to practice a skill that they're using. We're kind of referring it to more at-bats, right? The more times at bat you have to practice, you're gonna get better. So those are things that he's doing in the immediacy to try to provide more support, and break up the kids a little bit more so that the kids that are on level and above are continuing to go, and they're not getting kind of stifled a little bit or waiting while the other kids, you know, you can't hold back
No.
a few kids to move the rest of them forward. So, so he and I are working, and that's the plan right now. And then more time in classroom so that, you know, you're making sure that the fluency work is being done, and, because that's what it is, it's that opportunities to practice the skills that you've learned, especially at these grade levels.
Yeah, because there'll be one more opportunity, right, for the test, right, isn't it at the end of the year?
End of the year. Mhm.
Yeah, so to your point, right, so we'll see how effective.
Right.
The changes.
The changes that you're implementing through February
Yep.
break, and those things that you're gonna do, whether or not they're effective.
Yep.
I think that's really gonna be.
I also think that it's just really important that nobody's confused at what Aaron just said a little while ago. Poverty is not an indicator, an indication of one's intelligence. Poverty is linked to someone's exposure. So what does she mean by exposure? So if you look at all the studies out there, you look at socioeconomic levels, and it says the level of vocabulary that a parent would use to expose kids at a young age. Our kids put in 3-year-old programs, before they even come into our UPK grant funded program. Are some kids exposed to 2-year-old programs, 3-year-old programs, or is it a grandmother watching the child? Not saying that the grandmother watching the child doesn't add some great social emotional. My grandmother watched me when I was little, like before I got on the bus and off the bus. But I think it's really important that nobody leaves here today and thinks that what we're saying is somebody comes from poverty, that is an indicator of their intelligence. It's absolutely not the
No,
case.
absolutely not. It's just that
It's about exposure.
the trips that kids take, the places that they go. You know, some of our kids, when they go to Destiny, is that the name of it now, Destiny, right?
The mall.
Yeah. Some kids have never been there, you know, so they take a field trip to Wonderworks, and some of our kids have never been there from different parts of the district, so it's like a whole new, you know, world to them because they've just not experienced that.
You know, talk about like, what's your favorite zoo animal, and some of
Right.
the kids in the elementary said, I've never been to a zoo.
Right,
And so those are the things about exposure that she's talking about.
right, language-rich environments, so, and that's what we're trying, you know, that's our social workers, our counselors, that's what they're trying to get out into the homes and things like that, so that, we get our kids here, attendances, you know, we're trying to make sure the kids are here and that they're in attendance. If they are quarantined or isolation, how, you know, those teachers are getting on and making sure the kids are there. You know, all of that comes into play. And that's why you look at these kids who might have gone backwards. What was their attendance like? You know, are they kids that are on our chronic absenteeism that the building's working real hard to get into school? Because we can see that being in school makes a difference and that the kids are moving because they're getting all of that. You know, if they're not here, they're missing that. Or if their attendance is, they're here, they're not here, that choppiness, it's like Groundhog's Day, right? You're starting over every time they come back, so, yeah.
Now, the only other question that I have, it's more general, I don't know that it's represented in the data, but heard from a few teachers in our district and as compared to teachers in other districts, are we bringing back, and this goes more to buy-in in terms of the elementary school students, you know, obviously there's some recess, COVID has completely interrupted the kids being able to interact with each other. Are they getting back into the groups among themselves? You talk about small group, and I know that you're talking about, you know, 3 or 4 students with an adult teaching them, but, you know, when I used to be in the kindergarten and first grade rooms, there was lots of time the kids spent just working together amongst themselves and, you know, socializing with each other. Is that getting brought back in at this point?
I met with a 4th grade teacher at Millard Hawk who, when I did her observation, I went and I talked to her about it. And she wasn't doing that, and the kids were all in their rows, and I said, I watched you teach now for 5 years, this isn't indicative of you. And so she's like, all I needed was that, and so I redid her observation, and yeah, she had groups, and the kids got to pick their partners in their groups, and so yes, it is coming back. A lot of
Just
it
like
might just be
15-minute increments or something like that with respect to the social distancing and all that stuff? Okay.
Yep, and they have recess. They are doing that, and the kids play together and they work together. A lot, you know, the teachers will just kind of say, you know, your partners are there, just keep 3 squares, you know, between you. Be aware of who's around you and what you're doing. But no, they're all. That was a classroom, and once I went in, she made changes.
Right.
So I'm really seeing that in a lot of classes.
Is that getting communicated across the board in the district that they should be reintroducing all that stuff?
Yeah, because they're all 3 feet apart. So, and a lot of them have moved their desks so that they're still 3 feet apart based on the squares and stuff, so that they are doing some group work. I haven't been in, other than that one, where they're not doing something along the lines of that, or partner work or things like that.
Okay, so I have another question. Kind of circling back a little bit, when we're talking about exposure. Is there a plan, or are we working on things to help the kids? I mean, I don't really want to get into the haves or the have-nots and how it affects them, but do we have the ability, or are we working on things to help that exposure at home? You know, whether that be sending them home with like puzzles that they can bring back in exchange, or, you know, when my kids were really little, they'd send home like a book of the week, or I don't know, something that we can do to help control or aid that exposure at home. I mean, if that is one of the things, or one of the components that's affecting these kids and where they're scoring, I mean, is there something that we're doing to better control for them?
So what I do know is that when the kids get to a point where they can read something, they bring that home and they, you know, read it to your sister, read it to your cat, read it to your dog, read it to your friend, you know, somebody in the house, your neighbor, your stuffed animal, your Barbie doll, whatever. And then they bring that home for that part, because it doesn't matter who you're reading to, it's just the fact that you're reading. So they do that. The tricky words will go home, so that kids can practice that if they're kind of stuck on that. So that kind of stuff, it does go home. And then there's fluency things that they work on within as the kids get a little bit older, that teachers will send home to have them practice with somebody at home. Yeah.
I have a quick question. You had made mention, is it okay to speak?
I don't know.
No?
Yeah, we keep it up here, we have the blue card, if you
Okay.
have any other questions, if not, then it becomes us, audience.
No problem.
But if you have any questions that you have, if you want to get it to us, we will get it to you with the answers.
Thank you.
So I don't want to miss this part, but you met your goal, right? You said that.
We did,
Yeah. So congratulations.
because I did my math. I did
Yeah.
math. I
Well, I want to congratulate you on that. And I just want to say, seeing this grow from the beginning, right, countywide program and what you've done, I just want to, this is awesome. I think, you identifies areas that could be improved, and that's really what this is all about. And hopefully that you'll give you the tools that are necessary to make any corrections that you think need to be done. I think the board, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's really open to whatever tools you need in the tool bag.
Yeah, and what the teachers have found is that they need more decodable readers, so that's part of, the consultants are working with the principals and the classroom teachers right now, so that teachers have more of those in their classrooms to practice, because that's where the kids start to get before they get into that multisyllabic, bigger words. So we're working on building those libraries for sure.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Before we go on to the secondary level, a little housekeeping. I want to be able to recognize, we have a special patrol officer in the audience because he's new, and I wanted the board be able to see. This is our newest addition. He will be at AA Cole. His name is Bill Croft. Bill, if you want to come to the podium. So Bill comes to the district with a wealth of experience as a school resource officer. And when he retired from being a school resource officer, then he qualified to be a special patrol officer. So Bill, if you want to just give a quick little recap of what brought you here.
I started with I was with the city of Syracuse for 28 years as a patrol officer and a sergeant. I worked most of my career was community policing and working with the city school district as an SRO and as a supervisor as the middle school SROs, and then all of the SROs for the entire district. I worked in several elementary K through 8s. Actually, most of the schools. There's 32 or 36 schools in the city. So I got kind of used to bouncing around and get used to the different learning styles. Now I'm up at Cole. I'm loving it there already. I've only been there a solid week, and the kids have all welcomed me, the staff, the parents, everybody in the district's been great. My first week I spent bouncing through the schools to get to know the different buildings and different administrations. Again, great people, and I appreciate you guys giving me the chance. I retired in 2019, and I went into part-time work in my retirement. I had COVID in early last year. Ended up on a ventilator for 3 weeks. It took me 6 months to get back to work. When I got back to work, something had changed. I needed something more challenging. I needed more work. I tried another field. I was working in sales. Didn't like that, and when I quit my sales job, this job opened up, and it was like somebody answered my prayers. It's perfect, and the staff and the kids at Cole. I mean, it was my birthday today, and I was in the lunchroom, and the kids are saying me happy birthday. They're making me pictures, and I just really appreciate it, and I wanted to stop by and make sure you have face to the name that you saw on the agendas.
We appreciate that, Bill. And real quick, so if people aren't aware, Bill's actually employed, all of our special patrol officers are employed by the village police department, and then we're able to then contract through them, so they're in our schools 100% of the time. But when we were interviewing Bill was saying that what he looks forward to, and the highlight when he was a school resource officer, is just being in the hallways, making those connections with kids, just being another trusted adult if anyone needs anything, and to be a resource for staff as well. So as you all know, our emergency drills and whatnot are fully run by our special patrol officers, which is very important because obviously safety is huge. So Bill, we appreciate you coming here and being very patient, and I didn't want to sit through the whole thing. I want to be able to call you out.
Not a problem. I just wanted to make sure everybody got a chance to see who you are.
Thanks, Bill. Have a good night.
Thank you again.
We will now transition over to the second, am I reading this correctly? Secondary? Yep, Kristen Emmerich.
Good evening, everybody. Go eat some cake. I'm here with my team. We have Chris Delore, our assistant principal, Melissa Cisco, assistant principal. Chris has been working with our attendance committee this year. Melissa's worked with our AIS program. Mr. Villeneuve works with our Red Hawk program, but he right now is helping supervise the basketball game. So we will be heading over to that shortly as well to help out. So my team will be able to help me answer any questions at the end if we need it. Oh, I'm in charge. Okay, hold on here. There we go. So this is the mid-year report, so I cannot tell you if we've met our goals yet, because obviously this has to happen at the end. But I do want to shed some light on the fact that it's a struggling year. There's a lot of difficulty this year. It is for sure probably my hardest year in education. And there's some reasons for that, right? We're coming off of a year and a half of COVID, students learning how to socialize again, interacting with their peers on a daily basis. Oh, preparing for a cumulative exam. Our freshmen, our sophomore, our juniors have never taken a Regents exam. A lot of SEL concerns, right? They're dealing with social, emotional concerns that are now being brought back into the building. So with all this kind of in mind, just as a, I'm not a sugarcoater, I want to make sure that people are aware that it's a tough year. And I can't say that without saying that I love numbers, I'm a mathematician, but there's no numbers that are going to show how much we appreciate and respect the amount of work the teachers, the staff, and the students have put into this year. With that being said, our goal is to decrease the percentage of students failing 2 or more courses by 4%. So last year's data, which again, last year, right, at home learning all the way up until April, we ended the school year with the percentages on the left where it says 2020, 2021 totals. Those are the percentage of students that failed 2 or more classes. And a reminder, we're talking about classes. Some of these classes are not needed for graduation. These are elective classes. Some of them are core classes. Some of them are classes that are required for graduation. It's our job to meet with department coordinators, then department coordinators' job to meet with the teachers. We drill down all of this data as it comes in to find out the why. So for marking period 1, we recognize, well, geez, I hope it should be lower than 38%, right? We don't want to start at 38 or higher. So 19%, not too bad. It's increased, it's gone up to a quarter of the 9th grade population. Very typical for our freshmen to be struggling, to recognize that we have to pass the classes, right, in order to complete them or to move on to the next class. Always our biggest struggle, it's recognized every year. 9th grade teachers starting to recognize the fact that these kids are coming in, the last full school year they had was in 6th grade. They missed some of those middle school years of how to deal and interact with their peers while still being able to learn. So we're seeing that in 9th grade discipline, in the counseling office, but teachers recognizing, yeah, you might have a Regents exam at the end of the year, but these kids need to focus on a lot of priority standards because just jumping into the start of the school year coming up from COVID is not the way to go. So then you'll recognize in 10th grade, 11th, 12th, we're slowly increasing, 11th grade celebration, right, went down. We just got these numbers Friday, so the marking period just ended. We haven't been able to drill down marking period 2 data yet. It took us a good 2 weeks to drill down marking period 1, to talk about what classes is it they're failing, why are they failing, what's the attendance like, what's the assessments like versus compliance versus completion of work, right? Talking about are we grading based on the standards? Are our assessments based on standards? Is it just based on work completion? What's our homework average? What's our test average? So all those things we're kind of questioning ourselves and asking the why behind all that data. So there's a lot to look into it, and we have action plans that we created to help us figure out why our percents are where they're at. And are we going to be able to reach our goal of decreasing by 4% by the end of the school year? So, student engagement is huge, right? They need to be in class, they need to be paying attention, they need to want to be there. That's why we push differentiated instruction. It's all about every kid in that classroom. Are they engaged? So we put into place implementing and supporting the gradual release of responsibility. That's where you have the balance between student responsibility and teacher responsibility. I do, we do, you do it together, and then you do it alone. If you have that balance in the classroom, that's what a lot of our professional development is about. You have that engagement. Provide high-quality, need-based PD on half days. Provide actionable feedback during post-conferences. Really being instructional leaders as our team. Ms. Galvan's talked to us about that a lot. Mr. Calbuco has talked about that. What are you saying in the post-conference? Mr. Calbuco has told us a lot that when you have that one-on-one conversation, that's the most impactful time you'll have, I gotta take this off there, with a teacher, because that's the time you get to talk one-on-one. You get to have that real conversation based on academics. The next one is academic intervention services. Ms. Cisco's worked with our 4 new, and thank you very much, by the way, for those 4 new teaching staff. That has been huge. Being able to offer interventions that help with Regents prep, skill building, mastering those priority standards. We have developed a system to identify students that need academic support. Each marking period, we reevaluate. Some students have come out of AIS, new students are coming in. Right around this mark, we added a lot of students to marking period 3 because by now teachers have done practice Regents exams and recognize that even if a kid is passing the class, doesn't mean they're a test taker, right? I was not a test taker, but I had 90 average. But every year my parents would cross their fingers that I would pass their Regents exam. Those kids are being identified now so we can teach them the skills to be able to take those tests. So that's another reason why AIS is important, because some of those juniors have never taken an exam. They don't know what it's like. They're nervous. So we're building the AIS services. We're working on building it into the master schedule, getting it into the kids' classes, trying not to interrupt those electives they want to take. So building it off a study hall that they already have, opposite a PE class, that's key. We're not trying to take something away from them, we're trying to add support. Support the AIS teachers by providing targeted professional development, which Ms. Cisco's done a great job with, and Kira Currency has joined us as well. Then we have our extended day program, funded through the COVID money, creating after-school tutoring programs that focus on minimizing gaps in learning caused by COVID. So again, with all of these action steps in place, our goal is to decrease the number of course failures over time. Okay. Our next goal is to decrease the percentage of chronically absent students by 3%. So chronic absenteeism is missing 10% or more of school. That means out of the 180-day school day or school year, you're missing 18 days total. So when you look at the information to the left, again, most of the days last year were at home. I'm not going to say attendance was super accurate, but that's the attendance. But if we look to the right, and this is the part that it's concerning, although we kind of knew this was going to happen. Kids were used to being at home, getting to school with so much anxiousness and anxiety that word's been tossed around a lot this year. And it's real for these kids. More and more kids are coming with like stomach aches because they're concerned, they're anxious, they're nervous about being back in this building. And we're putting a lot of supports in place to try to help them. But if you look at that attendance, so I want to explain it. Marking period 1 and 2, they're each about 44 to 45 days. So the absences on those columns, you have to miss 4 or 5 days of school to be considered chronically absent. So for instance, those 9th graders, 30% of them missed 4 or 5 days of school, the first marking period. 38% of them missed 4 or 5 days of school, marking period 2. Mr. Solari did a lot of data research that's not counting quarantines or isolations. Did I read your mind? Okay. And then the next one, when you go far to the right, the percentage of the year, because that's out of 172, 17% of them are already considered chronically absent because they've already missed 17 days of school. So they're already, so our job is to not get to that 20%, we already have 17 there. So that's what's a little nerve-wracking, is knowing that we do have some kids that have already reached the chronic 17 days. And if you look down, very typical, our senior class is very typical every year, that our percentage would be the highest there. But when you go back to looking at grades, the failure rate is not very high. So what are we putting in place to help with attendance? We have our attendance committee. They meet monthly, they review the data, they identify and progress monitor students, explore building-wide strategies. There's a lot of students to meet about, to talk, and we're kind of, instead of necessarily individually thinking about kids, we're trying to like group them. Where's our kids in the yellow, right? Like where's our orange kids? They're almost in the red, they're almost chronically absent. What can we do with our kids in the orange? We implement tiered interventions. I know Erin already spoke about that. You know, plan 1 is in the classroom, right? When a kid walks in that you haven't seen in 6 days, the first thing you say to them is not, here you go, here's all the work you've missed. You missed all of chapter 2, right? You welcome them. You say, hey, great to see you, come on in. You don't say, oh, were you absent with days, right? You have to recognize that you missed them and you're glad they're there. And that's just a tier 1 strategy. We've been giving out attendance certificates, just celebrating the fact that you're here and we want to recognize you, because our big goal this year is to keep up with the kids that are coming, make sure they keep coming back, right, that they don't fall into that red zone. We've created more and more after-school activities, again, with the COVID money we put in place. These aren't like the big clubs, the DECAs, these are little things. What do you guys want? I want a board game club. Great, we'll put that in place. I want a place to go to do homework, but also I can talk about that. Great. I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. Got it. If they ask for it, there's a teacher that's going to put it together for them. So more and more this year, it's been great because we've had like little clubs. We're going to meet every Wednesday for the next 2 months. And then the club changes. Art projects. If they're buying into school and they have a reason to come, even if it's just to stay after school, it's a win for us. Because now we got them here. And that's half the battle. Mentoring, we started that up. Jim Petrella is our mentor coordinator, one of our counselors. He's been building the program and getting the more home-to-school connection. So the key, I think, to mentoring is really finding that student that you have a connection with. Then start with like a personal basis, get to know each other, talk a little. Slowly start easing in academics, but really the big thing is getting comfortable to have a trusted adult in school that they want to see and meet with on a regular basis. College and career readiness, right? They have to have a why, like why go to school, right? Like what's the purpose? That's why we put that under attendance. What's your pathway? Counselors are working on implementing transition plans for every single student. The transition plan is really helping to identify your career pathway. That means when they're doing course selections, when they're meeting individually with kids, it has to constantly be part of the conversation. We got training. Chrissy Smith has helped us with that. They are helping with the students who are identified with IEPs and 504 plans. We're starting with them specifically to have targeted transition planning, and then planning how to implement something like that on a mass scale at every grade level. Which means there's inventory tests and different things they can take to help kids identify their career paths. We're increasing the awareness of the career exploration opportunities at Paul B. Moreland Career Center. One way we're doing that is our business teacher is down there a lot. In her schedule, we intentionally scheduled her down in the Career Center so that we have someone that is there to make connections. For those of you that have been here in the past, Debbie O'Meara did a great job with that as a teaching assistant. And now we have her, and she's retired, and we have our business teacher in there who's making connections, and we are seeing a huge increase in the number of students participating in our career discussions. And a little bit more vast opportunities and people that are coming to talk, making sure we're hitting every pathway. Students will gain a better understanding of their career paths by using Zello. Again, every 10th grader is taking a class and uses Zello. The counselors are helping us come up with a plan where every single grade level is going to be doing some type of inventory so that we can use it, so that we have something for each grade and not just in 10th grade. So it has to be, where's the fit in the curriculum, right? Like where does it, in 9th grade is it English, in 10th grade is it in this business class they take? And then in 12th grade is government and economics. So they're trying to find fits, natural fits. So it's not just this week we're doing career, right? Trying to make that connection to a curriculum. So again, with all those action steps, our goal is to help kids want to be in school, recognize the importance of being in school, and increase our attendance. The last goal is to decrease the percentage, no, it's not. Try again. Oh boy, here we go. We will effectively communicate our instructional programming with our community to help foster a safe, welcoming, and nurturing learning environment. So some ways we communicate, which may drive people crazy, we're trying not to blast out too much on Blackboard. We quickly do some text messages to blast out. We have emails. We try to put together some community events like our Red Hawk Rally this fall. We've done some very creative ways to do pep rallies during COVID regulations. We write and distribute monthly newsletters, thanks to Mrs. Scope for organizing that. We increase our internship and virtual field trip opportunities with local businesses. And we've been building events that include parent and community engagement like our Red Hawk Universities. Any questions?
So have you identified, a couple things that might be a reason why, maybe there's new kids with chronic absenteeism that, maybe are never considered to be chronically absentee? Is there something going on with them? Is it, the environment? What is it, Because from what I understand, just from having kids in the building, their friends who always get good attendance with them aren't in school. And it's not the kids who, don't have a stable home life or come from generational poverty. It's not the typical, statistically, that's the kid. So have we identified, or have we talked to the kids, and said, why aren't you here? And are we addressing or trying to fix the non-traditional reasons why they're not coming?
Yeah, and there's certainly no mold, right? There's an honor student not attending. There's a kid that's not passing most of their classes. There's someone who was always great with attendance and now isn't there. A lot of times it's the one-on-one conversations and it's the phone call with the parents. And I would have to say 9 out of 10 times the kid's anxious about coming to school. There's so many reasons why, right? Sometimes it's just being in school, what kids are saying to each other, right? And it's reteaching them how to be around kids all day long. Like, let's socialize. We don't text that to the people. We're not going to Snapchat that person. And then it goes all the way from that extreme to just they've been home for so long. They haven't been in front of people. They haven't, they haven't interacted. But the anxiety is just it takes an individual call every single time to figure out what's going on. And it's hard to get to all of them.
Is there anything that you need from us to help reach those kids that are facing the anxiety? And is there anything that we can give you to help you?
We've put having the extra social worker in our building this year has been a blessing. Her tracking sheet for phone calls is unbelievable. House visits, just you gave it to us. We are grateful to have her in our building as that extra person. We have Farnham counseling, we have Rise counseling. We have 2 social workers, 1 social worker assistant, 1 social worker, and the 4 counselors, 2 psychs. Everyone's just very busy. There's waiting lists for both counseling, for both, and that's never happened before. There's waiting lists everywhere. So I think that's part of it too, is a lot of people are recognizing kids need support. And when parents are telling us that they're going for outside help and they're on an 8-month waiting list, it feels defeating. So we're being really creative though. We're coming up with come in for part of the day, come in for 2 hours, just trying to make anything work. So, no, I think we have the support. It's just slowly.
The kids have been out of school for a year and a half. I think of my son, he left in the middle of 9th grade and didn't come back till he was a junior.
Right.
It's, he missed his whole high school career.
It's a young building, right?
And basically right now, and I see, when I'm looking at your thing, I'm sitting here going, you know what? You got 3 classes of freshmen.
Yeah.
And 1
It feels that
sophomore.
way,
1 sophomore that are graduating. So it's really, you're really dealing with all freshmen again.
Right.
Starting in, and they missed the middle school. They missed the whole transition of middle school of that social piece.
Those are important years,
Yes.
right, for sure.
So I think you're doing well for what you're dealing with. Because I know with my son alone, being a junior, in the day after his birthday in his freshman year, he didn't go back to school until junior year. So it's that, you know, that affects everybody. But thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Mrs. Emily.
We'll now have Mr. Penrock, middle school goals.
Good evening. It seems like very recently I was here talking about some of these things. And again, joined by Mr. King and by Ms. Nugent from the middle school. And I'm going to echo a lot of the things that Mrs. Enright talked about. And our presentations set up a little bit differently, but very similarly, you're going to see some of the data is very much aligned. Shortly. Thank you. So you're definitely, I'm sure at this point in time, aware of goals and our goals in increasing instructional engagement and utilizing differentiation and good quality instructional techniques to engage students and improve their performance. We have a measurement that is that one of the things the elementary school uses and the high school doesn't use is with our STAR results, and really trying to increase those by 4% in math and ELA. As well as decreasing our chronic absentee rate. Another piece that we looked at is students failing 2 or more courses, and you see in 6th grade the marking period by marking period comparison up a little bit from marking period 1 to marking period 2, and grade 7 up a little bit. And again, as we get higher in grade, the amount of students failing courses goes up. There's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons why you see so little in 6th grade is the transition program that we have in place for 6th grade, and it's a new school and a new start. Even though the other students have not been in school necessarily in the middle school, they kind of feel like they know it and they've got the system worked out. But definitely, we're seeing more students not passing 2 or more grades. By the end of the second marking period, there is usually a dip, and in the number of students passing those classes, and then third marking period, they tend to turn things around historically, but it will be a challenge for sure this year moving forward with those numbers. STAR data, a little bit up, a little bit down. It shouldn't be marking periods, it should actually be fall and winter, but we've gone up on 6th grade ELA and about the same down a little bit in 7th grade ELA, and up a good deal in 8th grade ELA. STAR math down a little bit in 6th grade, up a good bit in STAR math in 7th grade, and 8th grade also up. One of the things to recognize is not necessarily all of our STAR data, not all the students necessarily took STAR data, depending on if they came back to school when they came back to school last year. So we know that number from last year, that 48% may not be as accurate as we'd like it to be, but we're looking at where did we start this year and how much are we growing? Because that's really what the key is where do we start and how much are we growing with that standardized assessment. One of the other pieces that I think really ties in with, it can be a predictor for how students do on the state assessments, and students haven't taken state assessments, and that's another piece that ties in with what Mrs. Enright was talking about. You can build your ability to take a test and stick with something long-term, because those assessments can be pretty challenging, and you need to focus for quite a while. And we saw in the past that carried over to Regents, as kids took those assessments in middle school, carried over to Regents and Regents success, and now we have several years of students who didn't even have the opportunity to take them. So that's an uphill battle. I'm going to kind of quickly go through the action steps in the mid-year update, because again, we presented these last month, but we're definitely monitoring our at-risk students to look for ways to improve student growth. Mr. King is leading, starting a building study team where we're really working on looking at 3 different facets: behaviors, attendance, and academics, and looking at individual students and how we're doing those, and how we're addressing those different areas. Because different students definitely have different needs, and so we're trying to look closely at individual students, because that's where we can make a difference, is with the individuals, not with the large numbers. Much like the high school, Mrs. Enright presented, looking at PD faculty meetings, our early dismissal days, and trying to give staff really actionable feedback and strategies from observations. We've looked at the distance learning playbook in the past, stuff from thoughtful education, and definitely the gradual release of responsibility. So it was fairly easy in the past couple of years to not respond, because you could turn off your monitor and the teacher did not know if you were there or not. So trying to get the students used to them being the ones who are doing the work and not just waiting for the teachers to do the work. And also the teachers used to that idea again too. It's a challenge for everybody coming back full time and going back to more of a normal situation. We talked before about after school activities, and the lunch groups initially were COVID driven, trying to reduce the number of kids in the cafeteria and have meet in the classrooms, but those groups have also kind of morphed into their own little communities where they spend more time together and actually can hear each other when they're eating lunch, as opposed to 300 or so in the cafeteria. And our homerooms, where we've been doing the Positivity Project, where we're meeting 2 times a month, like I talked about last month. Similar to the high school, we are seeing an uptick in students who are chronically absent, and from market period 1 to market period 2, that number is going definitely higher, and that is a large number, and I think Ms. Walter, you mentioned how to address that. It's just like Mrs. Enright said, it's got to be on an individual basis. We've got things in place, but you have to reach out, make a relationship with a parent, and make a relationship with a student, or at least a contact with a student where you can get them to come back. So we've been doing that through our attendance improvement plans and trying to reach out to as many of those students as we can. And again, a definite challenge. We already have a number of students who have hit that, I'm going to say 18 days, where they're going to be chronically absent for the year. But this is where we are. What can we do to get them in more, regardless of if they're considered chronically absent or not? That's what we have to do, is to get them to build up the being used to coming to school. They're coming to school muscles. And there are a lot of reasons why they lack those at this point in time. A little bit, I'm sure, is because it was easy to not come necessarily in the past. And attendance was, I clicked a button that said I was here, but I was never really here. I was maybe physically present, sitting there watching, but maybe not. Or maybe I was playing a video game instead of watching, or I never showed up at all. So we had the same anxiety issues. We had a social worker assistant. You asked earlier what you can do to support that. I think the biggest thing is to reach out and let parents know through the district newsletter and through any conversations you can have. Is we have a lot of things in place instructionally that'll help kids, and we have a lot of things in place that'll socially, emotionally help kids, but we have to have the kids in front of us to do those things. And getting people to find ways to help encourage their kids coming to school is what's going to help us academically, is what's going to help us obviously with our attendance numbers as well. And those are huge things. We're definitely doing all kinds of stuff to address social emotional needs of our students and staff. I had a teacher today say, "What is this thing in this envelope?" I said, "I don't know, let's open it." And they opened it. Actually, it was Mr. King, it wasn't a teacher. The first one I saw wasn't, it was interesting because it was a Vince Lombardi quote. And if you know Mr. King, he's a sports guy. And we had a TA who went on their own time, found stuff about basically everybody in the building, and gave them an inspirational quote. It's like 130 people on their own time. So, taking care of our staff and our kids, which is awesome. And these were, again, things that I talked about last month. After school activities and groups to foster participation and belonging among our students. We have 20, I think we might be above 20 now, because we added weightlifting, we added running, which I don't participate in the running part by any stretch, or the stretching part. Providing opportunities for staff to support and be supported within the building, school culture and climate meetings, We did the Halloween parade and costume contest, holiday themes, Spirit Week coming up, implementing the Positivity Project in the district twice a month, and trying to work the mentoring piece into our after-school clubs and activities, and allowing extra opportunities for tutoring after school to support kids academically. If we can get them there, we have stuff in place, we gotta get them there. These are survey results from our student survey. We should have new survey results pretty quickly. From the second go-round about this, really, is there somebody who's gonna notice if they're absent? Unfortunately, yes, we're gonna notice if they're absent. That doesn't necessarily have an impact on whether they come, but they do know that we notice and we approach them differently than here's all the work you owe. It's thank you for coming back, we're so happy to have you back, because we are, because we know that we can intervene. The ability to go to a teacher or some adult at the school if something's bothering them, and feeling like they belong. So things that we're working on, but things that we have to continually identify with those students who are chronically absent. What is the need that's not being met? Because if you've been in education at all, you've studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you know you've got to get those basic needs met to be present. We've definitely done a lot of communication with parents and students. Our student leadership group has a Canvas page where they're trying to do announcements and share with the kids what the Spirit Days are, and that's another group that we have, but they're also helping to communicate with kids. Our parent-teacher conferences for the fall conferences were way up, and a lot of times we'll have X number of slots, and half of those slots somebody might say they're going to come, and they don't come. And we have fantastic attendance at those things in comparison to the past. I think part of that is because parents are definitely concerned, and I think part of that is we offer multiple opportunities to get there. You can come on Zoom, you can come on a conference call, you can come in person, you can do any of those things. It all counts. We're happy to have you here because we need you here so we can get your kids here so we can help your kids. So we do newsletters, emails, text blasts, all kinds of stuff, and fairly straightforward. Really looking at our pyramid of interventions for academics, behavior, and for attendance. And again, that not building study team, behavior study team. Mr. King really working on that with an interesting group of teachers. He made a good point of getting people that aren't normally on committees and people that don't necessarily think the same way that he and others on the team do, because it takes a broad group of people to kind of brainstorm some of these ideas, and the makeup of that has been really good. And we've definitely been doing a lot of academic work that helps tie us into the elementary reading program, teachers doing letters training, and while all this is going on, we're doing a math and ELA audit to align our curriculum, look at the priority standards that we're trying to address. So there's a lot of pieces going on. I will take questions, but you're probably all tired of hearing from me. But I'll be here again next month.
Well, and you did talk about this at the last board meeting.
Yes, I'm coming in next month. Am I here? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will have Maureen Ladd come up now for the budget presentation.
All right, we're back to the money, back to the budgets. Is it on? So this year, for the first time ever, I believe, the executive budget came down. I don't think the mic's working. That's what I just said. Okay, this year, for the first time ever, I can hear it too. The executive budget came in about 2 weeks ago now with the promised state aid, new governor, new approach to education, which is very strange for us because I don't know the discussion that we're having as superintendents, business officials, people that are used to this process is, these must be the final numbers. Like, there isn't gonna be that play in there where there's a whole bunch of legislative asks and, you know, everybody fights over what pieces will move and what will shift. Like, it almost looks like these are the final numbers and there's not gonna be a lot going on with it. The biggest piece of this is that the new governor is going to stay with the promised foundation aid to bring it into the levels that it should have been at 15 years ago over the next 3 years. So the total state aid package is a 7.1% increase. 1.6 billion of that is into the foundation aid formula, and 471 million of that is into the expense-driven aid categories, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that one thing right there, the expense-driven aid categories, is always a fight every year. It used to be. They would say that they're going to cap them, they're going to stop them, they're not going to make those processes work anymore. So that's taken off the table. What does this mean for Central Square? Foundation aid for us has run its course. We are at our foundation aid levels. So, and that's the case for more than half the districts at this time. So they have a hold harmless going on there with a 3% increase in your foundation aid, which is what Central Square has in our executive budget proposal. And there's no updates or changes. This is the one item that will probably be discussed as you guys go to school boards in the various places, is that the foundation aid formula is old. And once this plays out next year, we're going to have to, they're going to have to come up with ways to address it. So we were happy with the governor's proposal. We are excited that her first executive budget maintains the commitment to foundation aid. With the pandemic and all the challenges that we're facing, this is one that we don't have to deal with this year, which is going to be great. So what do our numbers look like? For Central Square, the foundation aid, the blue line across the top, is a 3% increase. It's just over $1 million. The next 5 lines are the expense-based aids, and they are going up proportionally. You can see where they are. These items, when I say expense-based aids, what you receive in aid depends on what you spend. And this is what I have over in the corner published. This is what's on the paper that runs when we get this information. The pieces that run behind the scene come from all sorts of different places. So the 22-23 numbers are decent and are what we use in our budget, but comparing them to the 21-22 numbers aren't really true comparisons, because those are the numbers that sit in those databases now. They aren't our budget numbers from last year. So once we analyze the published document, you then need to compare it to our actual budget that we have this year. So in this scenario, it shows our expense aids increasing and running. The other categories, the software, hardware, technology, are pupil-driven aids, and those generally are going down slightly every year. They're not running right now apparently, because they're showing that they're going up, and that won't be the case. But obviously they're very small. And the UPK, the Universal Pre-K grant, always shows in this run, but it is not a part of our general fund budget. That's a grant. So the package shows a 5.5% increase. But if you compare these numbers, the 22-23 proposed is the exact same set of numbers against our adopted budget that we're sitting in this year. It's not that big of an increase. But what I want you to key in on, and I tried to make the point when we were talking at the last budget session, is the top number, the foundation aid. That's going up about 6%. Because remember, we didn't use the foundation aid number last year. We took it down because we were told that it was going to be cut back. So that's the key for us. That 6% increase from the budget that we're in right now will make, it gives me the ability, us the ability to have a budget that is going to be able to hold everything that we currently have. That's all you can ask for, really. I think that's perfect. The expense-driven aids, you can see the numbers that we have in our budget versus the proposed numbers that are sitting in the systems. The big problem that we have right now, or I should say, is the building aid. Because of our projects, because we have so many capital projects going on, between the phase 1 and phase 2 of the big capital project, and then the security project is in there. The finals are in the system, but they're not running in the system yet. So our number, the 4.6 million, is an estimated number based on, I work with a company called Fiscal Advisors that does our debt service and all that. So this is based on what we know we've spent on those capital projects, but it's not coming out in the system yet. So when I do come forward with a budget, it'll be closer to that 4.6 million, if not even higher. That 2.3 million number that's running in the system right now won't stand. The BOCES aid runs from the numbers that BOCES show in their systems. The private and public access cost aids come from another system. It's called STACK, which drives from the cost of special ed programming. And then, as you can see here, the pupil-driven aids are very close, which is how they normally would be. So we're looking at, even though the total aid package is just under 1%, with the adjustment of that building aid number, which I know will happen, we can get closer. The foundation aid will bring us within a 3% range, which is where we need to be. So we'll be building a budget pretty close to a 3%, which is what we need. A couple of other items that are in the works of the executive budget, which I think you will hear about, so I just wanted to pass them along, is that over the last couple of years, there have been stays on transportation aid and building aid. I think you've heard about different districts in the news that didn't get their money, and they were supposed to get it, and the governor has told them no. They've been fighting back and forth on that. This executive budget is going to allow for some forgiveness to those items because they generally happen because of turnover in employment. So, you bring in a different business official, a different superintendent, different people, they don't know that certain items weren't finalized and put into the system, and then a year goes by, these numbers run, and they're like, what happened? And so they're not, you always used to be able to go back and get those things corrected. In the last 2 or 3 years, that has not been happening. The governor put a hold on that, so this is a great piece. We don't have anything in the queue right now, but this is a big change from the prior executive budget. Another item that sits out there is prior period adjustments. There's millions of dollars out there that haven't been paid and are owed to districts. Basically, with all of these systems and these numbers running all the time, they continue to change. So when you get to the end of the year and your state aid's running in, if you owe them something by changing the numbers, they take it out of your last payment. But if they owe you something, it goes in a queue. So it sits there for years and years. So prior period adjustments is not addressed, and it hasn't been in years. It sits there, but it's one of those items that they were hoping that they would get some action on. Another big one that you're going to hear about in the next month or two is electric buses. This is in the executive proposal that all districts will run all electric buses. Obviously, that's a huge lift, and I don't know if it's even possible. And here are the different points regarding electric buses. I think a couple of the biggies are that electric buses currently cost approximately 3 times as much as the buses that we have. And the infrastructure on districts is huge. I mean, obviously, if all of the buses that would sat in our transportation center were electric, we would almost need an entire new transportation center. They'd all need to be plugged in. It would be in a whole new cage and a whole bed. So this would be an interesting discussion that I'm sure is going to happen. Obviously, this comes with a zero emissions legislation that's coming down the road. Another item that is in the executive proposal are waivers. for income tax, or taxable income for school employees, and it's for all employees. Due to the, our inability to get people to work, they're offering, or gonna have a offering that retirees can come back and not have a cap to what they make. And that's not just teachers, bus drivers, everybody. It's not a bad idea to get somebody there. This is another big one that I know you're gonna hear about, is our child nutrition program. It right now currently runs through state ed. And they want to make a shift to have this entire department run through agriculture and markets. It's supported by child nutrition. I think they believe that if it was a part of that larger program and the federal program, they might do better. But it's also worrisome for the SED and the directors, because there's a lot of states that run their food service departments, their school lunch through ag and markets. So this one will be interesting. This one's going to be a fight, I think. State ed is opposed. The governor is in favor of, so we'll see where that one goes. Another one, this one, they make a big point about in, as far as like my associations, ASBO, and you'll hear from school boards, but the governor in her executive proposal is looking at creating statewide reserves of 15%, but yet school districts can only have 4%. So they're taking this as a move towards probably increasing of, your ability to have unappropriated fund balance, because you need more than 4% for, just operations and cash flow. So that one they're finding, they think is going to be promising. We'll see what happens. And then the other item that's on the table is a lot of different mental health care grants and initiatives. They're creating programs to address the impacts of the pandemic, exactly what the other people were just talking about across the district, across the state. And we do have grants happening right now that support mental health, after-school programs, extended days, all of that are in the works and are being moved forward. This is another one, just quick, because it's a big one for schools. When students are placed in a residential placement, which there's a variety of places across the state where they can go. It used to be that the county paid for, say, 80% of it, the district paid for about 20%. There's been a move across the last couple of years where districts are now paying closer to almost 57% of that. And this proposal would make that permanent. So far, that's just been just this year. It hasn't been made permanent. So this one, obviously, schools are against, but in the big scheme of life, it's going to be paid out of somebody's pocket, whether it's the county, the state, the district, the public health system. Somebody's going to end up paying for this. It's just a matter of shifting of where they're going to put the costs. And right now, a big portion of it is on the districts. And the other piece of this was expanding state ed. And if their proposal were to go through, it's almost 190 positions that FTEs is full-time equivalents. But that also includes the moving of the school lunch or child nutrition to the ag and market division. So that'll be interesting if it happens. Any thoughts, questions? Anybody have anything?
So,
that we're
Maureen,
involved
you
in?
said that the addition of the employees includes the move, but that 189 was only for SED, so the number would actually be higher
Yes,
because those jobs will be cut.
correct.
Okay.
Cut or moved. I'm not sure how they plan on implementing that process. And there really aren't people at state ed anymore. It's kind of a big issue, It used to be, if you had a problem, you could call there, and there would be somebody there that could potentially help you. Whereas now, I shouldn't say this, I've been doing this for 20+ years. I know more than they do. And so I'm looking at them going, go to this system, look at this number, and, you know, tell me where you see the backup. And then I can say, okay, this is how we gotta fix it, but they don't, there aren't people there anymore. So
Well, again, let's be very clear, they're all in the office about compliance and restrictions because they're the ones that keep calling us. So I wish that was completely true across the board, just not in the department you're talking about.
Yes, and we actually are being audited right now too. He'll be with us for a couple months. All right, fiscal stress. I'll try to make this one really quick. It's kind of boring, but it's one that I really like. So the comptroller's office has a fiscal stress monitoring system. The numbers, the program is put together to help us identify issues that will potentially be budget impacting, and they're helping us to, they're giving us a tool to look at to see what type of fiscal shape we're in. Basically, the system analyzes two different things. It has financial indicators and environmental indicators. So for school districts, they're looking at the key drivers. They're looking at the year-end fund balance, your operating deficit or surpluses, your cash positions, and any reliance that you might have on short-term debt. On the environmental indicators, they look at the economically disadvantaged students, which is essentially our free and reduced lunch percentages. They look at class size, teacher turnover rate, change in property values, because that is a big driver in our tax levy. Voter approval rate, and our percentage of English language learners, which we very rarely show a percentage there, even though we have a couple of them. So essentially, they take these indicators, they run them in a program, and they get a score for you. And your scores can be significantly stressed, moderately stressed, susceptible to stress, or no designation. And we just got our scores again. They came to Tom, and we have no designation in both the fiscal stress and the environmental designations, but we do have a slight score on the environmental, but not enough to get recognized at all. So I didn't pull these out because this is part of the package when it comes, and this shows unassigned fund balance for Central Square as compared to all schools, compared to schools in Central New York, and against the medium upstate schools. So basically, I like these types of graphs that show us against the rest of the districts. Because sometimes I think, you know, I tell you that this is our number, but that by itself means nothing without the comparison to all the other districts that we have. So that's our unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the gross expenditures. This is our total fund balance as a percentage of gross expenditures. And like I do say to you, we are less, and we need to work to make that a little higher. Our operating surplus has been good the last couple of years. We have received revenues greater than our expenditures. Our cash investment is good. Our liabilities are less than our assets, essentially is what that means. And we do not borrow. So, this is cash as a percentage. They basically take your expenditures and divide it by the 12 months. So we definitely have cash flow at this point to make our expenditures. And that's where we have our fiscal stress score based on those items. Very few schools, I can't get that out, have any susceptibility to stress. There's only about, I think, across the state, maybe 48 of them have a stress score at this point. The environmental comparisons, basically our free and reduced lunch, the 47%, against all schools, we're higher. Against schools in our Central New York region, we're really right about average. Common branch class size, we're we're 1.8 higher than all schools, and we are basically 2 points higher than schools in Central New York. I should say 2 students, really, is how it is. We have a little bit higher turnover rate with teachers, which is what gives us that score on the environmental side. And our change in property values are small, just under 2%, which is actually better than all schools average. Our budget approval rate is about 67%, which is 2 or 3 points less than all schools, and about 4 points less than the schools in this area. And we really have no ELL learners, not enough to hit the graph. We go between 2 and 5 students, I think, across the entire district. So that's our environmental score, the 15, and that's where it comes from. And it's right in line with the rest of the schools in the state and Central New York. So the reason I pull this out is I want to talk a little bit about the fund balance, because I can input those last 2 columns based on our plans. And we know that we're planning on using our unassigned fund balance to support the next capital project. We talked about that. So if we bring our unassigned fund balance down to 3 million, would that throw us into a susceptible indicator? So you can use the score to do that. And right there, it goes down quite a bit. It's going to go down under 4%, but it still won't throw us into a bad category. So I think we'll have it'll be a good use of our fund balance. Then obviously the total fund balance as a percentage of expenditures will go up. And our operating surplus will go down. The cash versus liability versus assets it doesn't touch that much at all. And the cash as a percentage of the monthly expenditures obviously will go down, because basically we're using this cash for the project. And that's that. Does anybody have any questions at all about business trips?
Thanks, Maureen.
No, I got one more, sorry. When we only have one meeting a month, I've got to get all these in. I'm pulling up the bus purchase one because tonight for your approval is the letter of intent to purchase buses. We need to get this out. Honestly, just like everything with the supply chain, it's been really hard this year with getting vehicles, especially buses. And if we get our letter of intent in, we're hoping maybe our buses will get in line in front of a couple other districts, who knows. Generally, the buses come in the summer, they are gone through, they're put on the road, they're all ready, and on the first day of school. This year, I think we just got them all on the road. It's been months that we were waiting for last year's bus purchases. So, I'll be really quick. Transportation aid, which is one of those categories that was expense-based revenue, is based on operations of transportation and on bus purchases. All schools have a transportation aid percentage. It ranges between 6.5% and 90%. We are at 86.9%. Districts must obtain voter approval to purchase buses. That's why when we go to the vote, there's always a general fund budget proposition, there's always a transportation proposition, and sometimes a capital project proposition, because we buy buses every year, so we have to get voter approval to buy them. And then we have to submit, after we get voter approval, we have to submit to SED to get approval from them to generate the transportation aid. Aid comes to us over 5 years in a standard amortization schedule, 2 payments a year. This is the 5-year history of our bus purchase, which is also a debt history. So your proposal tonight for the 22-23 bus purchase is $1,164,491. This is for 7 big buses and 3 small buses. This would be the 5 5-year debt schedule or amortization of those payments. We stick with that because we're getting aid in 5 years, so we finance them over 5 years. So obviously as we bring on the new, it's almost like buying a car. So you bring on the new one, the old one is gonna fall off. And just for our fleet, I don't know if people realize how large we are. We currently have 86 buses. We have 62 large buses, 21 small buses, and we have 3 gray vans. With the proposed purchase, this is what we currently have. The goal or the recommendation is that you have buses 10 years older or less. We've met that goal and we are able to keep that. Our issue, because we're so large, is our buses get up there in miles before we're able to trade them in. So this shows where our buses are now, and basically with that new purchase, we're pretty close. It keeps us in the same category, because obviously the new replaces the old. We put the new buses on the longer routes to keep the mileage down on the buses that have high mileage, and it's just a rotating schedule. That's that. If there's any questions, I've got Johnny driving the bus. I'm a really good PowerPoint presentation maker. So I just wanted to throw that one up there because the letter of intent's on there tonight, so that you know what we're asking.
Thank you, Maureen. Okay, on to item E, personnel. Can I ask for a motion to accept? Chance? And Christie? All in favor? Any discussion? No? All good. Okay, item F. Can I ask for a motion to accept item F in its entirety? Chance? And Christie? All in favor? Any discussion? No? Okay, all good. Item G, board reports. I just wanted to let you know, and I'll have Pearl scan this to you guys. Got a letter from city about the annual meeting and the board rep information, so I'll have her send that to you guys in an email so you get that. And that's all I have. And Mr. Calalufa? Oh, does anyone else have anything? Rhonda? No? Okay, then it's all yours.
I just have 5 announcements and I'll give a COVID update. At this weekend's Class A wrestling tournament, Central Square placed 9 wrestlers into next weekend's sectional tournament at the SRC Arena. Cole Mulhauser and Zach Overton each took home a class championship in their weight class. And we had 2 additional runner-ups. The team took 4th place overall out of the 10 teams and has an outstanding chance of sending multiple teams to the state tournament. Congratulations to the boys varsity bowling team who won the sectionals on Sunday and will advance into the state tournament later this month. On January 15th, the Oswego County Music Educators Association All-County Band Festival was held. Central Square had the following representation: 14 6th grade students who earned a seat and participated, 14 7th and 8th grade students, and 9 high school students. That's a great job. The varsity winter guard competed at Phoenix on January 29 and placed 1st in the competition. The Red Hawk Regiment winter drumline began their competitive season and finished 5th in their division, scoring above 3 other schools. We are proud of our students, and they continue to work hard to develop their shows and are grateful for the help of all the parents that volunteer for that, who come alongside our programs to assist with the props, etc. Coming up, Winter Guard Home Show on March 5th, Paul D. Moore High School Gymnasium. Winter Drumline Home Show the following week on March 12th in the Paul D. Moore High School Gymnasium. The school music production March 18th. But I thought that was postponed. The musical. Yeah, so Yeah, no, I think that she had said that she wanted to postpone that, but I'll look at that. Both will be in the Paul D. Moore Auditorium. Here's the COVID update. So, well, numbers are starting to definitely come down. We were averaging about 22 to 25 cases a day. Now we're between 8 and 9 cases a day, which is fantastic. So, when it comes to the mask mandate, so Central Square has been consistent throughout the entire pandemic. And not just on the mask mandate, but on all of the mandates and requirements. And we've sat here at board meetings, and we have put numerous things out in parent letters that said that the district will not add any additional mandates or requirements beyond what is legally required for the school districts to follow in New York State regarding mandates. We did not add any additional. Over the summer of last year, school districts up and got the right to be able to have the parents choose. We were one of the few districts that did that, as we had about 3.5 weeks leading into summer vacation without any cases. And then we had about 1,200 to 1,300 students in the high school and middle school over the summer, for summer school, but also for band and for sports. And the overwhelming majority of them did not wear a mask. They could wear a mask if they felt comfortable to. That's parent choice. You got to respect both sides of that. And so there were no issues. I think we were the only school district when we were allowed to make the plan leading into the fall, at the end of summer. They had said that we were going to use the metrics, and we were going to, if we were not in the red zone, again, parents would have that choice. That was again changed when Governor Hochul came in and enforced the mask mandate. So it is very, very important to understand that as a district, we check with legal on literally everything. And regarding the mask mandate, we could not overrule the mask mandate. The mandate was in place, whether people disagreed with the mask mandate or not. It was a mandate. We were forced to follow it. A number of things could happen if we didn't. It would shut down in-person learning, and I think we just saw from all of the presentations today, the learning gaps, a big part of that, not only in attendance, chronic absenteeism, student engagement, but academics, was the remote learning. So it is very, very important that we keep on the same path. Now, with that being said, we have made it perfectly clear, and I've taken a number of phone calls from parents that were concerned when I made these comments before, because they thought that if the mandate went away, we would enact additional restrictions as a district and require all students and staff to continue to wear a mask. We have not shied away from the fact that we said that the district will not add any additional mandates and restrictions. I made it perfectly clear to the board. If any board members had any issues with that, they can speak with me about that. That has not happened. So again, if this stay is lifted, we will do exactly what we said we would do, and that is not impose any additional restrictions. So with that being said, I had prepared the board, because if that stay originally I thought was going to be a week long, that it would go to student choice. Not only student choice, but staff choice in wearing a mask, because that's what we did over the summer. If there's no law or requirement requiring us to do that, then we would then be going above and beyond to have an additional Central Square mandate, or restriction if you want to call it, and we had committed that we were not going to do that. So that is currently where we stand. So I know there's been a lot of talk in other districts about the mask mandate, about what would they do if the mandate was lifted. There should really be no surprise, and so that's why I believe I'm starting to get those phone calls from parents that want students to have to continue to wear masks, and I just bring them right back to what our stance was from the very beginning, that the district will follow any mandate that we are required to follow, but we are not going to add any additional restrictions or our own mandates when those state mandates are not in place. So that's basically, really in a nutshell. Our nurses have been doing a great job. We've complied with literally everything that legally we have to. It's been a huge service. Every Sunday I have parents reach out to me to say thank you that you provide that service for the testing. We used to have about 125 parents, students that would come to those Sunday testings, and then last Sunday we only had 13, which is a very good thing. And out of that, we only had 4 positive cases. Normally, we were seeing anywhere between 30 and 40 positive cases on those Sundays. So I do believe that we've turned the corner. I have the same feeling it was what it was in the spring of last year, and I feel we can get back to that sense of normalcy, where, you know, this mandate will be lifted, and students will be able to see their teachers' faces and be able to see each other's faces again, which is something that we all look forward to. That is my superintendent report.
Thank you, sir. On to item H. I have H1 can I ask for a motion for student trip for the DECA conference on March 9th through the 11th?
Oh,
Christie and Shannon.
I only have one question. So from the form, it looked like the students are paying for the majority of the expenses?
For DECA?
Yeah.
So through fundraising, that's always been the case.
Any other? All in favor? Okay, proposed executive session. Can I ask for a motion for executive session to discuss the tenure of one particular person with no action to follow? I have a motion. Christie? Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. We will be adjourning from the executive session.
In the corner, you had a question. Do you want to email me that? I'll get your answer before you wake up in the morning, okay?
At this meeting or no? Okay, so what I served you, and you guys all got a letter of intent to understand that you signed an oath to the Constitution and that you have not held it. And it does give you an example of all the laws and the rules that you have not abided by. There is things I'd like you to take out. The whole COVID, mask mandates, they're not laws. Okay, I would like other stuff like testing.